So here is the bottom corner with the little herringbone stitches going through the middle. This block, you have some of the things you've already done. So some of the stitches you've already done. There's the stem stitch around the outside, stem stitch for these little stems, a stem stitch up the middle of these, and these are lazy daisies attached to those stem stitches. And these are those little hearts using 2 of the fly stitches. So the only stitch, oh, and a satin stitch heart. So the only stitch left that I haven't shown you on this block is the herringbone. So don't ask me why, but for some reason it makes more sense for me to do it upside down. So we're gonna start, I'm left-handed, so I'm gonna start at the right and work my way left. So it's kind of going backwards on this. So you're going to start all the way over on the corner or on the side where it touches the heart and come all the way to the top of that X, and your needle goes under and then comes out on the next X. So there's the first stitch. Now I'm going to go down, follow that stitch down to the bottom, put my needle in, take my needle out at the beginning of the next stitch. So this is a really fun one to do once you get it down. So I need to tighten my stitches just a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to follow that stitch down, go underneath to form that little X there, and then do the same at the top. And you just keep repeating that all the way through. Sometimes these stitches that have kind of a longer stitch, they are better if they're done in a hoop. So I know I'm not showing you a very good example here of how to use a hoop since I don't, but if you're having trouble with it, that might help. So just a couple more to go. One more little guy here. There. And now that herringbone row is all done. Up in this house block, it's again doing most of the same stitches we've done before. So stem stitches, and then the little hearts are just those double fly stitches. So the stitch that I want to show you on this block is the smoke that comes up and forms a heart, and we're going to stitch that using a backstitch. So a backstitch kind of starts off like a running stitch. So I'm just going to pull my thread up where I want to begin, and then I'm just going to take very small stitches, so about 1/8 of an inch, come up another 1/8 of an inch. But here's where it changes. Now I'm going to go back. This is what it's called, a back stitch. I'm going to go back and put my needle in that same hole where the first stitch ended, and I'm going to jump to the other side of where my thread comes out. The needle goes back in that same hole. Some people can do this stitch so fast and so pretty, and it still is one that I really have to work at. I think it's just a matter of practice. I have found it's more helpful for me if I pretty much put my needle right down rather than go at an angle, if that makes sense. Now, a back stitch is a great stitch to use if you're doing really tight curves, like lettering. It's perfect for that. Or if you're just stitching up really tiny little things. So I'll go ahead and finish this up. So now we have the finished little house block. with the little backstitch smoke. The little corner block with the heart has some of the same stitches, and the one that I want to show you that's different than any of the others so far is the fern stitch, which are these kind of vein looking stitches down the middle of the leaves. So with the fern stitch, you're going to start at the point of the leaf. You're going to take your needle right down the center and then pull the needle up along the edge of the leaf where that angled line is. And then we're going to bring that angled line back down to the center, same hole, and come up on the other side. Now we've formed that first V. And now you go straight down the center. And we repeat that. So we're going to go do the center line, and then out to one side, down in the center, out to one side, down in the center, and we're going to go down the middle. Kind of a funny angle here. There you go. Now we're almost done. So we just go down in the center, come up at the bottom of the leaf, and then down in the center again. And that's the fern stitch. Between the squares are these little areas with a few different stitches in them. There's the stem stitch that goes straight down the middle, the little lazy daisies, French knots, and then a satin stitch heart. So just as a little reminder, I was going to show you the lazy daisy. So I've done the rest of the stitching. I did the stem stitch up the center. For the lazy daisies, I'm going to start right at the stem, pull my needle up, carry my thread up and around so it mimics the line of the little lazy daisy. Go take my needle in back at the stem and then out at the top of the little loop and carry the thread behind my needle. And now I'm going to put the needle down right on the other side of the loop to tack it in place. And that is a lazy daisy. I'll go up one side and down the other. You can do it back and forth, whatever floats your boat. And so on. So I know on this stitching, I've been using some variegated threads, and that isn't the case for the pattern cover. The sample that I did for the pattern, I used one color of Baldani floss. And so to do this outside stitch, if I was using one color like I was before, I would do it differently than how I'm doing it now with a few different colors. So I'm going to show you how I would do it if I just had one color, in case that's the way you're planning on doing it. So I would start at, well, I'd probably actually start over here. So these are all crosses, and this on the corner is actually 2. You don't want to go all the way across. So start at the bottom of the heart. So I'm going to go follow that down, just kind of like you did with the herringbone. Go underneath to this other stitch that's going to come up. Now at the top, we're not going to cross like we do in the herringbone. I'm just going to go down in that same, or that intersection where the next line meets. And then in the pattern, you'll see there's a little cross stitch that goes over the intersection where those two meet. So I just pull my needle up right there so that I can just make that little anchoring stitch pretty easily. And now I'm going to bring my needle up where the French knot is. and make my French knot. And then start over again. The reason why I kind of figured this little system out was because I wanted to use the least amount of thread. And if I just did those and then went back and did the running stitch or the little anchoring stitch, I'd be using up more thread and it would just take more time. This is just more efficient. So sometimes when you're combining some different stitches like this, it's kind of fun to it's kind of like a little puzzle for me to take a minute and figure out what's the most efficient way to stitch this. I'll do one more. So you start at the inside point. The needle goes in at the bottom of that stitch, up at the beginning of the cross stitch, down at that point, and then up right next to where that little intersection is going to be. And we're going to cross right over it and go up where the French knot will be. And as you can see where I traced it, so to stitch this outside part, using the variegated threads, I'm going to use 3 different colors. One color to do the crosses, and one color to do the little tacking in place, and then one color for the French knots. So to do these little crosses, what I'm going to do is come up at the bottom, down at the top, and just kind of work my way all along, trying to find the way that uses up the least amount of thread, although this will use up quite a bit of thread. And then remember that in the corner, this isn't one long stitch, so make a stitch right there in the center. Okay, and then after those are all done, you go through with the next color of thread, if you're going to be using different colors of thread, and do the little tack stitch over where they cross. So it's basically like a little running stitch with a space in between, and then the little row of French knots. And that will finish up all the stitching. And here is the finished second version of the Love Sampler. This is the one that I stitched using the Cottage Garden threads. It's from Australia. And I just love the variegated threads. They're just beautiful. So if you follow all 3 videos, you'll see how to do all the different stitches. But one thing I wanted to point out, if you did want to try it in the different colors like I did, I had 4 different colors that I used. They all tied nicely together. What I'll do is, the first thing I think about is, okay, I think I want all the greens to be the stems. So I find the things that I know the color they're going to be, and then kind of work out from there. I knew I wanted the word to be in the pinks and purples. So since that made such a big statement, I went ahead and used a blue for the outside to kind of tie it all together. So that's just something to think about if you're going to use different colors, colored threads, as where the placement of those threads is going to be. I want it to be kind of an all-over look rather than this is pink, this is purple, and I think it worked pretty well.